Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Money Pros. I'm Oliver Tutt, Certified Financial Planner Practitioner, and I'll be your host for the next half hour as we talk about all the issues related to your money, how to make it, how to keep it, and hopefully how to help it grow. Let me give you a rundown of what we've got in store for today's show. First up, we're going to be talking about the shrinking stock market. Now that may seem like a surprising topic given that the stock market is at or near an all-time high, depending on where and when you actually watch this. But we're going to be talking about the shrinking stock market, and it's an interesting topic. We're going to be joined by our tax pro, none other than Greg Porcaro, CPA and partner with Otrando, Porcaro and Associates. He's going to be here to talk to us about some dubious but surprisingly entirely legitimate tax deductions that you may be surprised about. So we're going to go through a few of those because it's always nice to find out what you can actually get away with when it comes to the IRS and tax time. We're going to talk about oil prices. They're pretty low, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons for that. And then finally, we got a viewer question on the necessity of credit monitoring in today's age of identity theft. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But let's jump into our first topic, and that's the subject of the incredible shrinking stock market. Now, as of this taping, and you're probably watching this about 2 weeks later, the stock market is near an all-time high. So if you look at the Dow, the S&P, stocks are doing pretty darn well, mostly large cap growth stocks, and we'll probably talk about that more in a later segment. But we want to talk about the shrinking stock market, and this is a subject that actually caught me a little bit by surprise, reading some articles, and found out that the number of listed stocks out there, meaning the number of stocks that an individual could go to their brokerage firm and actually purchase, is declining at a surprisingly rapid rate. So here are the statistics. In the last 2 decades, 20 years, half of all publicly traded stocks have disappeared. Now, what do we mean by disappeared? Really, one of two things can happen. The company can go out of business, or more commonly, the company is delisting and the company is becoming a privately held company where the stock is no longer publicly traded on an exchange and therefore is no longer available to investors in a publicly traded stock market. In 1997, there were 7,355 publicly traded stocks. Now, there are fewer than 3,600 stocks available in the United States to buy on an exchange. The Wilshire 5000, which is an index we don't normally talk about, we usually talk about the S&P and the Dow, but the Wilshire 5000 was designed to track the total stock market, and as the name implies, when it first came out, it had 5,000 stocks in it. It was named after the 5,000 stocks that it had in it at the time it was launched. It grew to over 7,500 stocks by 1998. It now has fewer than 3,600 stocks in it. The last time it had 5,000 stocks in it was 2005. So this is an important development, and let's talk about some of the reasons for that. Let's put up the slide really quickly, and we'll talk about some of the reasons for the decline. First of all is the red tape of going public. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but the reality is of being a public company, of going public and allowing your stock to be traded on an exchange and maintaining that status involves a lot of paperwork. And when you hear a lot of paperwork, you should associate that with a lot of cost. So a lot of companies, even very large companies, have decided it's simply not worth it anymore. Next reason, the rise of venture capital. Typically why companies go public is because they need to raise capital for expansion and growth. But the rise of the venture capital market means that newer companies that would normally want to go to the stock market to raise money for development are no longer choosing that route for financing. There are private investors that will invest in these early stage venture companies, and that means that it's no longer as necessary, particularly for smaller companies, to raise capital in a publicly traded offering. And finally, private equity investors. This is akin to venture capital, but this is usually later stage investing, and what this means is that even very, very large companies with hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue are no longer need to access publicly traded capital markets in order to gain access to the money. There are private investors who are referred to as qualified or highly qualified in industry parlance that will invest in these companies without having to buy the stock on a public exchange. So why is this significant? It's significant for a couple of reasons. One is for stock pickers, mutual funds, other people that manage stocks. when there's a limited menu of stocks to choose from, it makes it a lot more difficult to differentiate yourself from the herd. And the other issue is that when there's fewer and fewer publicly traded stocks, it means that the stock market can become less and less associated with the overall health of the economy. We see the S&P up, we think that's good for the economy, but maybe that's not really that representative of how the economy is. So it's an important thing to consider. So just some food for thought, the incredible shrinking stock market. There's not as many to invest in as there was 20 years ago. All right, up next we're going to be joined by Greg Porcaro, CPA with Otrando, Porcaro and Associates. Legitimate deductions that may come as a surprise to you. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Money Pros, joined now by our tax pro, Greg Porcaro, CPA and partner with Otrando, Porcaro and Associates. I get a kick out of this topic, and we wanted to play the Twilight Zone music right over it because
that was my hope.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction,
That's right.
So we're often talking about, cautions like, don't do this, don't try to get away with this. But we're going to talk today about some stuff that average, ordinary people that have to file a tax return would look at and go, that doesn't seem like that would fly, but in fact may fly. Before we do that, though, we want to offer a caution to people, and I'm going to let you articulate that caution as they're researching these things on the internet.
That's right. So while we were developing this topic, I found different articles, so to speak, online, and used the information there and cross-referenced it with our tax research database to see if they were true. We found more than one that wasn't exactly correct. So the caution is, if you read something online, we all should have learned this by now, it doesn't mean it's true. So if you come up with a crazy idea online, call your CPA and say, is this correct? There is a way to verify whether, in fact, what you're reading is true.
So let's talk about some of these. And the first kind of group of them, and many of the most surprising, fall under the category of medical expenses. So just quickly before we talk about the individual examples, what generally is the rule about deducting medical expenses?
Well, we did a show on medical expenses a couple of months ago, I guess it was. And bottom line is it has to generally be something that's prescribed by a doctor to alleviate a medical condition. Somewhat specific, and there are limitations based on income. 7.5% for younger people, older people, 10% for younger people of your total income. So they're not common to see medical expense deductions that ultimately translate into a tax deduction.
Which is one of the reasons that people that are trying to deduct this stuff want to look for big ticket items, and we're going to talk about a couple of those, right? Because it's enough to make a difference, unlike a bottle of Tylenol, which might not matter, right?
That's right.
So let's talk about a couple of them. First surprising one, how do I get away with deducting clarinet lessons for my kid?
So this is actually covered by a revenue ruling. So the IRS actually created a ruling back in the 60s that said that if a child who has a severe overbite is prescribed by their orthodontist, that clarinet lessons will alleviate that problem. And I don't know if anything about
that's real or not.
that part of it, because I'm not an orthodontist, that would translate into a treatment of a medical condition that was prescribed by a doctor and therefore was deductible as a medical expense.
So as strange as it sounds, it falls under the description you gave of a legitimate medical expense. Let's talk about another one. Now this is a big ticket item. I can't believe this. How do I deduct the installation of a swimming pool?
All right, so before, I want to just re-emphasize, this is a fact-based determination, so please no one take away from this, like tomorrow, call up the pool guy and say, I want a pool, my arm hurts, doesn't work like that. So certain conditions, polio, bursitis, not bursitis, bronchitis, excuse me, that create breathing problems. So there was a case where someone had severe breathing ailments that could not be treated by any other means than by a pool. And so the doctor prescribed, literally prescribed in writing, installation of a pool and a regimen for treatment that actually alleviated this person's medical condition. So he could actually breathe better if he swam. Now, even though there was residual benefit to the family, it was not significant because the primary motivation was the treatment of the medical condition that was prescribed by the doctor. This particular person was able to deduct the cost of a pool.
Now, having said this, there have been plenty of people that have tried to deduct the cost of a pool where it's been disallowed. And what are some of the examples of
like
why
one
that
case,
happens?
for example, where someone had a broken leg, so it's a temporary illness problem, and the chiropractor said you might want to swim, it might help you recover faster. So that translated in that person's mind, well, the doctor said get a pool, so it's a medical expense. Or
if you install this palatial thing with the grottos and palm trees.
That's right. There has to be a reasonable amount, so you can't put in like a Bellagio-style pool in the backyard, even if it is prescribed by a doctor, because it's going to be too excessive in relation to the value of the home. So there are limits. I just want to reemphasize, this isn't an open game. You have to look at the facts. You got to get a doctor to sign off, which sometimes isn't the easiest thing to do as well.
All right, let's talk about another one that I think is worthy of addressing, and that is breast implants. Would breast implants normally be deductible?
No, cosmetic surgery in and of itself is not deductible. However, if you are going through, a woman goes through cancer treatment, for example, and has breast reconstruction post-operation, then because it's addressing a medical condition, which, by the way, could be physical or mental, then it would be considered, and there was a ruling on this, so this isn't a gray area. Government has said that this type of situation would translate to a deductible expense, and we're given the deductibles being what they are, you know, it's quite possible someone would have this type of surgery and still be out of pocket some money.
Right, it's possible that insurance might not cover it at all,
might
right?
not cover
and it could
it. Well,
still potentially
I don't know the ins and outs of that, frankly. I mean, I would think if it's directly related to the treatment of cancer, it probably would, but it might not be entirely covered, and the deductible might be high. And then some of it could be done through pre-tax savings, too, which we also talked about.
And what about weight loss programs, finally, under medical expenses?
Again, not gym memberships per se, but if the doctor or someone who's obese or has hypertension, high blood pressure, whatever, and it's prescribed by a doctor to lose weight, which is probably that common, the program cost itself, not Nutrisystem and all that kind of thing, not the cost of the food itself, because you're going to eat something. The cost of the program, maybe involving a nutritionist to evaluate your diet and that kind of thing, could translate into a medical expense.
All right, so that's some of the medical expenses. Let's move on to another category. This is a head shaker to me. I can't believe there's anything in this category that would be deductible. Expenses related to your pet. Now, can I take my pet as a dependent?
You know, you took my thunder there a little bit. Everybody says that question, half serious, half kidding, right? And I have noticed a tremendous increase in connection between people and their animals. It's really gotten a little bit odd.
Like children, I know.
So I thought this would be a good category. And the funny one out of the gate was there was a person who owned a junkyard that was infested apparently with rats and snakes. So he had the brilliant idea to buy cat food to lure cats from the neighborhood into his facility so they would do damage to the rat and snake population, which apparently worked. So he deducted the cost of cat food. Now, probably not a big ticket item, but he deducted it and it was disallowed. And in a court case, I think it was Sullivan, the IRS lost that argument because he had a legitimate business reason for having those cats invade his premises to eliminate
one.
Pretty clever, probably less than an exterminator too.
What about moving expenses?
Well, you know, this is one you could take for granted, right? So we all know that if you have job-related moving expenses, that the cost of moving your family from here to here for job-related moves is deductible. But it costs money to move a pet, whether you're putting them on a plane or depending on the size of the animal, if you have to ship them in a special way, if you have a special kind of pet.
It could be a horse or something
like that. A
horse,
exactly, good point. Is part of the cost of the move of the family. So Rover's, you know, part of the family. The cost of moving that dog is also going to be part of your deductible moving expenses.
And then finally, sometimes a controversial topic, but service animals. What are the requirements here?
Well, they're not as stringent, except that there's a distinction between service animals, ones that help, for example, the blind, CNI dogs, so to speak, and service animals that relate to people who are needed for anxiety. There's a distinction between the two that's beyond the scope of this conversation.
Right.
But for the cost of service animals to actually help blind people or perhaps people with hearing impairments, those are considered medical expenses. But I looked a step further and said, well, if I'm a business owner and I need that dog to get back and forth to work or the cat to stop me, you know, when the phone's ringing, that kind of thing, is there a business deduction which is much more beneficial? And there isn't. So the government has distinguished this as a primarily medical, exclusively medical related expense.
Okay. So if you're going to be able to do it, it's going to be a medical expense. It's not going to be business expense. And that's a great segue into the third category of surprising deductions that we want to talk about. Business expenses, this is an area where there's a lot of, people try to get away with a lot of stuff, right? So there's opportunity for both good and bad here, I guess. So let's talk about some of the business expenses, and some of these go way back, right, historically. And the first one that I love, I'm going to try to use this one, is the cost of beer given to customers.
Right, so this gentleman, this is an interesting case. This goes back to 1982. This gentleman had a gas station, and as a manner of enticing or helping build goodwill with his customers, he would buy beer, and when they came up to fill their car with gas, he would give them a cold beer. And I thought about that.
The irony is
right. So I'm thinking that goes back to '82. In today's world, you know, their attorney would have a fit, the insurance company would have a fit, right? Obviously, you want someone driving up to the gas station, you give them like a six-pack on their way out.
Right.
It's probably not a good idea. So it'll never happen. But the interesting thing about that is at first glance you say, what do you mean beer, deductible, right? That's not going to happen. But because the connection was to the establishment or improvement of a relationship with the customer, which is the heart of entertainment and those types of expenses in many cases, the government lost that argument. So it just so happens no one's doing that, I would think, anymore. But
well, you never know.
But you never know.
Another interesting one, African safari. Somebody was able to deduct an African safari.
This was a really old case as well, and very surprising. So in this situation involved a family that was in the dairy business. So they wanted to go out in a big way to promote a new product. So they arranged to visit Africa, and it was a safari in the true sense, but they went to places that are agricultural in nature, and they promoted their business, and apparently the publicity was huge. So it definitely helped promote their product in a different market. And so even though there was definitely some personal benefit associated with that trip, the government lost that argument that it wasn't deductible, and they were able to deduct, so this went to tax court, they were able to deduct the cost of their African safari. I'll quickly contrast that with actually an ammunition manufacturer who lost the argument, even though in theory the hunting and all that would be more related to a safari, because he couldn't prove the connection. So even though he did the trip, he wasn't promoting his ammunition, he didn't really bring his business into the limelight of that trip, therefore he lost that argument. So with all issues, like I said earlier, you got to look at the facts, see if your facts fit, the facts that are good versus the facts that are bad, and then you decide what side of that, how you're going to fight that.
I think all of these illustrate the importance of working with somebody who's a professional like yourself to sort through this stuff, because you may think you've got an ironclad argument and somebody's going to see through it pretty quickly.
Well, they'll work to see through it, that's for sure.
All right, it's, great stories. Thank you very much. We're going to have to do this again because
yes.
I bet there are more of these. So, all right, up next we're going to be talking about the price of oil being at all-time low and what some of the reasons for that are. So stay tuned. There's more to come here on The Money Pros. Welcome back to The Money Pros. I want to talk a little bit about oil prices because those of you that are going to the pump for your family vacation to fill up the family wagon may notice that gas prices are pretty low, and wanted to talk about some of the reasons for that. So as we're taping this show, which is the beginning of August, crude oil prices sit at about $48 per barrel. And when I first started researching the topic at the beginning of July, so about a month ago, crude prices were closer to $42 a barrel. So they have come up a little bit in the summer, which isn't unusual. But we wanted to talk a little bit about the reasons why, because as of July, when they were down at $42 a barrel, that was the lowest price we'd seen for gas since August of 2016. So that has a lot of ramifications for the economy, some good and some bad. So let's talk about the reasons for that. And I have a chart that I think is going to illustrate what's going on here pretty well. And really it all boils down to production. So this is a graph of U.S. crude oil production in millions of barrels per day. And that first red line, you see a giant peak there in July of 2015, where U.S. oil production hit a peak of nearly 10 million barrels a day of oil. Now flash forward a year to that second red line, that's July of 2016, you see that it's down to nearly 8.4 million barrels per day. Now, we go through to July of this year, you can see that peak oil production is back up at 2015 levels. So we're seeing the oil production that we saw 2 years ago, nearly 10 million barrels per day. And the reality is that this is what's driving oil prices down. It's a supply and demand curve issue, and with the U.S. producing more and more oil, at some points we actually become a net exporter of oil, which is really hard to believe for those of us that can remember, at least for myself, sitting in lines with my parents waiting to buy gas in the 70s. The reality is that the United States produces now millions of barrels of oil per year, and our production currently is near an all-time high. So low oil prices are great for consumers, and we all know that, right? It makes our vacations cheaper, it makes our commutes cheaper, it makes things that oil is required in order to produce plastics and things like that cheaper. So it's very good for consumers, but it's not always good for stock market investors. Those of you that pay attention to this stuff may recall that in 2015, when we saw a similar peak in production and a drop in fuel prices, it was not a good thing for the stock market. And the reason for that was that many people speculated that an increase in production and a decrease in prices suggested that industrial output was declining, that industry was not drinking the oil that was being produced, and therefore the economy was struggling. So stocks actually struggled in 2015, and low oil prices were one of the big reasons that was attributed to that. However, right now, as we referenced at the top of the show, the stock market is at or near all-time highs, and we don't seem to have those same concerns. So while low oil prices was a concern in 2015 that caused poor stock market performance, that does not seem to be the case here in 2017. Also, interestingly, points out the declining influence of OPEC, Arab states not able to support oil prices the way they could in decades past. All right, up next, we're going to address a viewer question on the importance of credit monitoring. Stay tuned, there's more to come. Welcome back to the Money Pros. We want to talk about a viewer question. I think it's a great one. Viewer wrote in and asked, and this is a question I get all the time. With all the stories about hacking and identity theft, is paying for credit monitoring services a good idea? Now, we've all seen the ads from LifeLock and Credit Karma and a variety of other organizations that offer subscription services that will monitor your credit, make sure that your identity doesn't get stolen. And I can't attest to any of these services. I haven't used them and I don't know anything about them. But here's what I can tell you is generally I don't think it's necessary. Now, if you've been the victim of identity theft and perhaps it's a recurring problem or it reaches an extreme case, maybe it's something you want to consider. But for the vast majority of people that are either concerned about it or perhaps found out that they were the victim of some form of identity theft, like a credit card opened in their name or a tax return filed under their Social Security number, I don't think it's really necessary. Here's the resource that you do want to know about, and it's from the Federal Trade Commission, and it's a website called identitytheft.gov. And via identitytheft.gov, you can get all of the information that you could possibly ever want about identity theft, and particularly if you're a victim of theft, exactly what you need to do to recover from it. They'll give you a recovery plan. They'll show you how to get free copies of your credit report. They'll show you how to put alerts on your report. They'll really tell you everything you need to know. So I think you can save your money. You don't need the identity theft protection. That's it for today's episode of the Money Pros. Thanks for watching. We hope you join us again next Sunday right here on the Money Pros. Have a great weekend, folks.